For the last show of 2023, we are placing a spotlight on the beloved London-based online radio station NTS. In 2019, NTS launched its own label as a means of achieving and reissuing lesser-known records, while also releasing music from contemporary artists and radio residents such as Slauson Malone or Mika Levy. No strangers to the airwaves, the hosts of this month's show are NTS residents Flo Dill of The Breakfast Show and Sam Strang, NTS's head of music and host of the long-standing show As Ant Said. During the episode, the duo weave Brazilian funk, dungeon synth and Amapiano into discussions surrounding the importance of the label in today's music landscape, NTS's varied musical output, and the process behind making its upcoming compilations. Enjoy!
Pamoja Record.
Kibo travel escape babako. Kibampani na awis. Mofan.
Dukan the beat.
Nakumbuka maneno yake tu, ulisema tulisahau. Ananiweka kibo kilo juu, dekisa amepanda dau. Nakumbuka maneno yake tu, ulisema tulisahau. Ananiweka mimi kilo juu, dekisa amepanda dau. Anasiro, oh kwenye chapa, asidalalo, oh kwenye chapa, anasiro, oh kwenye chapa, asidalalo. Kama kukupenda nilifanya kosa, naomba nisamehe. Kama sitoliseka kukukosa, nikaishi mwenyewe. Kama kukupenda nilifanya kosa, naomba nisamehe. Ubese mwingi uliniponza, katafuta mwenginewe. Anasiro, oh kwenye chapa, asidalalo, oh kwenye chapa, anasiro, oh kwenye chapa, asidalalo. Nimetoka kwenye show Vingunguti, hapa nilipo mimi mwenzako na vichenchi. Nimepigiwa kwenye simu nende besi, wadogo kibo kanda bongela party. Usipokuja mimi nitanyongea, wasipokuja mimi nitajutia, wasipokuja mimi nitanyongea. Sijalala, anasiro, mibali ya kwenye chapa. Sijalala, anasiro, mibali ya kwenye chapa. Sijalala, anasiro, mibali ya kwenye chapa. Latifa, tatizo sio kupendaga, ukijua tatizo mazoea mama kabisa. Rudi nyumbani kipenzi, si unaelewa mimi nimekuzoea sana. Latifa, tatizo sio kupendaga, ukijua tatizo mazoea dada kabisa. Rudi nyumbani kipenzi, si unaelewa mimi nimekuzoea sana. Sasa umeweka chuki kwa nini? Oh, unaweka chuki kwa nini? Sasa umeweka chuki kwa nini? Oh, unaweka chuki kwa nini? Oh, umeweka chuki kwa nini? Sasa umeweka chuki kwa nini? Nimekuja kwenye party, ibwana kiboko na shemu simuoni. Nimekuja kwenye party, ibwana kiboko na shemeji simuoni. Oh, analeta chuki kwa nini? Oh, analeta chuki ya nini? Oh, analeta chuki kwa nini? Oh, analeta chuki ya nini? Osh, ija, una kanjani bafeto. Mwanangu kibo chavera. Nikiwa na kibo chavera mama baba hatari hapo. Vipi mse baba kibo chavera, mbona simuoni kibo?
Makuzi ndugu changu, unajua zile sema shega hapo tunenjoy.
Bora vipi wazee baba? Mbona mmekaa peke yenu? Vipi tena mashega?
Oya msizo. Umeona yule demo anavaga ule nyekundu ule? Yule demo wangu ule.
Mbona mimi yule demo wangu mwanangu? Kuja naye hapa hapa. Unacheza kweli wewe? Kibo travel escape babako. Wazee wa timu kibabo babe. Watoto watafuta jarisi sana tu. Watoto wapikulana na kubali mamboi. Watoto walishababi, watoto bange mbili, wazee wa Ginelia. Watoto tala matembo, watoto city farm mabibo. Watoto wa bichi.
Hello, you're listening to Carhartt WIP Radio, and today we're doing a spotlight on NTS Radio and its label Output. My name's Flo, I'm the host of The Breakfast Show on NTS, which is a radio station started in 2011, based out of London, although now we have studios in Los Angeles and Manchester. And for the last 3 years or so, the radio station expanded into a record label, and I'm joined today by Sam Strang, who for the last few years has been running the label. So there's two sort of arms of the label, is that correct? There's a kind of archival reissue arm of it, but then there's something that works a bit more closely with contemporary music and the network of NTS hosts. Could you talk a bit about maybe the contemporary music that NTS is releasing?
Yeah, so that's largely led by us hearing music and scenes that we love. We're focused at the moment on compilation projects and kind of snapshots of scenes. And yeah, I mean, it's meant that we've found ourselves in the last few years, you know, in Tanzania, we're documenting the Singeli scene out there, the Cumbiaton scene in Mexico, and at the moment just about to launch into a new series of releases that we're going to be doing from Brazil, starting in Sao Paulo on the funk scene out there. And yeah, that's going to kick off towards the end of this year, start of next year, with a release called Funk BR Sao Paulo, and this is a track from the release.
PH Visão, DJ Calote original, o destruidor de paredão.
DJ Cass, tá me produzindo, tá fazendo bruxaria.
Viu minha prévia sorriu, lá do fluxo ZS, a chota chega, piscou, né puta xereca mexe.
Então vem porra lá puta, vamos ver se você aguentar.
E inconsequentemente no Insta tu aparece.
Vem porra lá puta.
Melhor despotar mamando do que uma me enganando.
Bem gostosinho.
Vem porra lá puta.
Vai sair na internet e foi tudo repostado lá no fixo ZS. E foi tudo repostado lá no fixo ZS.
Essa novinha safadona, tô no baile sarrando. Essa novinha safadona, tô no baile sarrando. Já botou me aposentando. Melhor despotar mamando do que uma me enganando. Melhor despotar mamando. Melhor despotar mamando do que uma me enganando. Melhor despotar mamando. Melhor despotar mamando do que uma me enganando. Melhor despotar mamando.
Minha foto ela curtiu, o Reels ela curtiu, ela gostou do conteúdo, falou que me vendo, ela se divertiu. Oi, vem pro QG, hoje você vai se divertir a peça. Oi, vem pro QG, hoje que você vai se divertir a peça. Vai ser gravada mamando, depois tomando leite na tcheca. Vai ser gravada mamando, oi. Vai ser gravada mamando, depois tomando leite na tcheca. Vai ser gravada mamando, depois tomando leite na tcheca. Vai ser gravada mamando, depois tomando leite na tcheca.
Vem porra lá puta.
Melhor despotar mamando do que uma me enganando.
Bem gostosinho.
Vem porra lá
Vai
puta.
sair na internet e foi tudo repostado lá no fixo ZS. E foi tudo repostado lá no fixo ZS.
Essa novinha safadona, tô no baile sarrando. Essa novinha safadona, tô no baile sarrando. Já botou me aposentando. Melhor despotar mamando do que uma me enganando. Melhor despotar mamando. Melhor despotar mamando. Melhor despotar mamando. Melhor despotar mamando do que uma me enganando. Melhor despotar mamando do que uma me enganando.
Minha foto ela curtiu, o Reels ela curtiu, ela gostou do conteúdo, falou que me vendo, ela se divertiu. Oi, vem pro QG, hoje você vai se divertir a peça. Oi, vem pro QG, hoje que você vai se divertir a peça. Vai ser gravada mamando, depois tomando leite na tcheca. Vai ser gravada mamando, oi. Vai ser gravada mamando, depois tomando leite na tcheca.
So that's something that's coming out now, sort of 3 years into the inception of NTS, and I thought maybe it might be nice to take it back to the very beginning and the impetus behind starting a label in a landscape in which lots of artists seem to think that labels are perhaps less impactful than they were a few years ago. I know you have a big label background working across all sorts of different release outputs. Maybe you could talk a bit about what you see the role of a record label as now and the value that it can still bring to an artist.
Yeah, I think record labels were rightfully challenged in the last 5, maybe even 10 years, in terms of what they were contributing. I think the walls came down for a lot of artists, and it made them and their teams kind of question why have a record label in the first place, whether or not you're an emerging, totally fresh face or if you're a more established artist. So yeah, I mean, we're forever trying to make sure that we play a useful role in helping find that artists, particularly in the case of the compilations, find a valid role in having that music out in the world. So to start off, we largely kind of anchored on everything that happened around the London setup and the more immediate community that we have here. So that actually meant focusing some of our initial releases around projects we were working on through NTS, where I work kind of across the programming anyway. And we had a ongoing project called Work in Progress, which was partnered with Carhartt. And we worked with an array of incredible emerging artists, some of which have now, in fact, most of which have now kind of gone on to make names for themselves on a real remarkable level. The likes of Nala Sinefro and Slaughter Malone, who both have contributed music that we've put out through the label setup. But we also just made the most of existing relationships with what we think are incredible and important artists. So yeah, here's a piece of music, I guess, from one of the first things we put out, which was a Mika Levy and Deval Timothy release. And this was Mika's contribution, a track called Hosting.
And I think now it would be good to sort of get a sense of the archival arm of the label, because that's almost as important as the new things that you're releasing. This underneath is something from a forthcoming release, is that correct?
Yeah, so this we've been working on for a while. This is a piece of music from Axel Schultheis, German musician, from a release called European Primitive Guitar, which is our slightly obnoxious attempt to document the sounds of transatlantic, I guess, adventures in instrumental guitar music that were happening alongside when in the US you obviously had John Fahey and Tacoma, and the penning of the American primitivism as a kind of music movement or sound.
And is there a time period for this compilation?
This dates from 1974 to 1987, so it's like a relatively large span of time compared with what we do with a lot of the kind of contemporary projects where you're trying to kind of drill down into something. There's definitely something in that I think with the archive projects you are allowed a little bit more of an opportunity to kind of dream up a world.
And what was the first archival compilation that you put out with the label?
The initial one we stuck out was one called Down and Out, which again covers quite a broad, loose world of what we call downer folk, or loner folk. And that was across late 60s into early 80s, largely private press recordings. This kind of sadness kind of at the core of most of the tracks, that was kind of doubled down on by the fact that these had been largely kind of recorded in isolation by these artists and put out into the world independently. And our task would be to, get into dialogue with some of these artists and ultimately resuscitate.
That must be challenging, working with some people who have, what feels like quite a long time ago, for some people will feel like a lifetime ago, put out a record that was very personal to them at the time, and then in comes a stranger on the internet saying, I want to release it with this, contemporary record label and things like that. Is that difficult when you're working with people like that? And have you encountered any sort of serious challenges? Anyone that just absolutely didn't want to be part of any of the projects?
Yeah, yes to all. I absolutely love it as a task, because a lot of the time these records have maybe sat alone as like the only pieces of music that these artists will have put out, and maybe date back kind of 40, 50 years. So it's always kind of sweet. Sometimes their expectations for the music and the projects are way bigger than some of the contemporary artists we'll be working with on releases whose audiences are in the millions, and it's kind of a nice dynamic that you're kind of being swept by an artist who ultimately has been otherwise kind of forgotten in time. We're not particularly precious. A lot of the releases that we put out aren't from kind of any sort of holy grail kind of collectible records. A lot of them are usually pieces of music that are on otherwise sometimes maybe not totally, what's a polite way of
they're not on magnum opus albums.
Yeah, exactly. And they maybe make sense in the context of the compilation rather than like as a whole. There's been, particularly with Down and Out, there was one that stuck in the mind where, again, it was a really incredible piece of music, and we had been all lined up to include it, and then I suddenly got a text out of the blue after we'd sent the musician the rest of the compilation in order to get his final blessing, and he texts back being like, what a pathetic collection of music.
Let's hear something from Down and Out.
This is the opening track from a kind of cult and celebrated Cornish folk musician in her own right, Brenda Wooten, and an artist called John the Fish, who is a regular collaborator of hers. This is track from 1967, I believe, called Stars.
I'm counting stars all alone. I'm counting stars all alone. I lie and wonder why the moon still moves through the sky. I've got my eyes open wide. I've got my eyes open wide. The window and the wall, but I don't see them at all. What is there calling me out? What is there calling me out? I've not a thing to prove, but somehow I can't seem to move. The candles burning down low. The candles burning down low. And as it burns away, I'm counting stars till the day.
All right, now let's go from these sort of relative unknown and pathetic songs, that's not my phrase, into something in a totally different universe. You were talking a bit earlier about working with these people who have never really achieved much recognition for their music, in comparison to working with sort of massive stars who have an established audience already and a sort of, for want of a better word, professional musicians. I think a good example of that is the Amapiano Now compilation, so maybe you could talk a bit about the process of making that compilation.
Yeah, I guess with every music scene you have more notable names and more emerging names. So when we wanted to do something around the Amapiano scene a couple of years ago, the vision wasn't necessarily to work with some of the artists that were on the compilation, some of which were on already of massive note. But fortunately, Joe and Shannon, who were kind of central in devising and pulling the project together, had existing brilliant relationships with lots of key artists and managers, and we suddenly found ourselves in a position where we had, you know, whether it was Vigro Deep or Mr. Jazik or Camo and Failer, we suddenly had this like roll call of both really, really important artists in the scene and kind of some newer names that we were kind of helping to bring up. But to see some of those tracks, both in South Africa and internationally, kind of resonate in the way that they did was kind of really reassuring in terms of what we were able to contribute to a project and can contribute in future. And yeah, I mean, particularly with Possible, the DB and Go-Go and Musa Keys, Lebs of the Villain, like a whole roll call of incredible artists on that track. And we suddenly found ourselves eternally kind of finding new worlds of opportunities. And then, yeah, I mean, it was kind of capped off at the end of last year where they were asked to come to perform the track at the end of the Chanel catwalk performance in Senegal. And yeah, it was just to come full circle. The track had already, it'd basically been 2 years that it had been reverberating around the scene on an underground level. The track had been received like a radio rip from a mix, but then had become a radio hit just off this it wasn't even an official version of the audio. So there were some reservations and worries that the track had already had its time in the sun when we put the compilation out. But yeah, it was kind of nice just to kind of be like, there's always a new audience to reach with music, even if it feels done to death on a local level. And sometimes on our level, that's the nice thing, is being a kind of voice of reassurance that, outside of your immediate audience, for those artists, that there's something to build on.
More people to hear your stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, on top of what we've been listening to, this is a track from the release. This is a Mr. Jazik and Empower 69 track called Stuff Room.
All right, now from Amapiano to something totally different. Recently, NTS put out a compilation of, is it Norwegian black metal?
No, it's actually not. In fact, I forget. I think there's only maybe one or two tracks that from Norway. It's from the US, France, Italy. There's some UK. So yeah, I mean it's global in terms of, but it's all like 90s atmospheric, synth-laden black metal that was the precursor, I guess, to kind of the current dungeon synth sound that's really popular, particularly in the US at the moment. So yeah, I mean, we were thrilled to end up with the release being such a kind of beautiful reflection of, again, what is a really, really a scene that's really built on true validity of what those artists are doing and how they're communicating with the wider world. So I think particularly talking with, we had a piece of music from Secret Stairways, and who's an artist who died many years ago, and we managed to get the family to kind of give their blessing for us to include some music from his releases on the compilation. So yeah, this is a piece from Ascend called Lamas Tide by Secret Stairways.
That all sounds fantastic. Let's round it out and say goodbye with one of the tracks from the forthcoming funk compilation. Do you think? Start Where We Began.
Yeah, so this is Muzal and MCGW. Yeah, thrilled to have this on there. Yeah, hope you enjoy.
Fez loucura pra caramba e diz que a culpa é da cachaça. Fez loucura pra caramba e diz que a culpa é da cachaça. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que fode, fode. Fode piranha, fode. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que passa. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que fode que fode que fode fode que fode que fode fode que fode que fode fode que fode que ai que fode que fode fode que fode que fode fode que fode que fode fode que fode que ai GW que tá cantando, arrebentando com as safadas. Fez loucura pra caramba. Diz que a culpa é da cachaça. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que passa. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que fode. Fode que 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 ai fode que 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 ai. Fez loucura pra caramba e diz que a culpa é da cachaça. Fez loucura pra caramba e diz que a culpa é da cachaça. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que fode, fode. Fode piranha, fode. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que fode. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que fode que fode que fode fode que fode que fode fode que fode que fode fode que fode que ai que fode que fode fode que fode que fode fode que fode que fode fode que fode que ai GW que tá cantando, arrebentando com as safadas. Fez loucura pra caramba e diz que a culpa é da cachaça. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que passa. Ai caralho, piranha, fode que fode. Fode que 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 ai fode que 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 ai